Go ahead and get started with the community development meeting. First up is an informational only item on the 5655 Broadmoor.
This is a parcel of property that is currently a parking lot. I think it's been a parking lot for a long, long time. It's on Broadmoor, just north of Broadmoor Park, right across the street from Mission Tower office building. The property was purchased 2 years ago. At the same time, the Mission Tower office building was purchased by CAPROCQ. Not sure what that stands for, but that's the name of the ownership. And at that time, they approached the city about making some improvements to that parking lot, and that's when we formed the special use permit. So that special use permit was approved by you all back in January of this year for use as a parking lot. Some improvements including bollard lighting, about 48 inches high, a little bit less, and then 4 feet of right-of-way designated for sidewalk. So this plat is kind of the final step before we have the engineers submit construction drawings, and it does dedicate the 4 feet of right-of-way along the west property line along Broadmoor for that sidewalk. That sidewalk will go south, connect with the sidewalk in Broadmoor Park, and connect with the crosswalk that goes across Broadmoor to allow those that work in the office building to be able to access the parking lot in a safe manner. This does meet all the findings of fact that are stipulated in the codes, and the Planning Commission did meet on the 25th of June and held a public hearing regarding this matter and did approve it 7-0 for a recommendation for you all to approve. So, questions about that?
You will be voting on that on the 28th, is that correct?
Correct. 18th.
Thank you.
Next week's council, whatever that date is.
We've had, because it's at this level, we've had no public comment about any concerns they have.
I don't think you had anybody when you did the special use permit, did you? You had some residents that attended your planning commission meeting.
We had an audience for the Plat. I'm not really sure if they were here to hear this one or the other. I don't think no comments were made.
No
so,
comments.
Yeah.
It's just informational only.
Right.
So, any other questions? All right, excellent. Next item up will be the final plat of the Gateway second plat. And again, this is informational only.
So this is the gateway side of 4801 Johnson Drive. I won't go into the history of the project. You all are very familiar with that. The first plat was approved in January of 2013. We did go through a final development, preliminary final development plan that was approved in 2017. So this plat would reflect some of the changes that were made with that final development plan that was approved in 2017. And it goes further just to kind of clean up a lot of the easements from previous plats that have been done. More clearly defines the right-of-way or the easement for that storm sewer channel that goes through the property. In particular, what it does is subdivides the previous plat, which was 1 lot, into 2 lots. So it's now lot 2 and 3. Lot 2 will be dedicated to the apartment buildings that are going to be built at the corner of Johnson Drive and Roland Drive. And then lot 3 will be the remainder of that parcel. And that'll be subdivided with future plats that are submitted to you all for consideration, primarily for the hotel, the food hall, entertainment venue, the office building, and then the parking garage itself. And again, this does meet all the findings of facts that are stipulated in the code, and this was heard before the Planning Commission at the meeting on the 25th of the public hearing. There were no comments made. The Planning Commission did approve this unanimously for consideration by you all.
Any questions or comments? And then again, we'll be voting for this on the 18th, correct?
Correct.
At City Council. All right, thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
All right, next up we do have some action items. The first one will be updated resolution approving the 2019-2023 CARS project.
Thank you very much. Back in April, we brought a resolution to you all for the 2019 to 2023 CARS projects that we submit to the county every year as a 5-year CIP. Since that time, there have been a couple of items that changed that we wanted to make you all aware of. The first one, when you submit a project for the first year in the program, you have to also submit a stamped engineer's estimate of that project. So with the Broadmoor project, Woodson gave us a stamped estimate, and the actual estimate for the total cost of the project had come down. So we used that estimate for what we send into CARS. So we have changed that to reflect in the CIP. Another item, just so you all have it on your radar, and I think we'll touch base more on it in the CIP discussions, is the Knoll Avenue UMass project. Prairie Village contacted us and said that they were going to be submitting a piece of that as part of their CARS submission this year, to kind of prompt CARS to make a decision on whether that was going to be a treatment that they could do or not. So in that CIP discussion, we'll be involved with that because 50% of that stretch is ours, but Prairie Village has submitted that in their submission. So the only actual change that we would have with this updated resolution would be to reflect the cost estimate change in Broadmoor.
And which one is that, John? What's the Prairie Village also?
The UBAS project for Overland Knoll. Melissa called and said that they've put that out in 2023 in their 5-year CIP to see what CARS would say about including that. So that's.
Have we had any, in the past experience, have we had any, you know, does it behoove us to work with another city where we have two things going in at the same time? Does that not look good on both cities? If we're trying to kind of consolidate, do things at the same time so they're not coming in and out?
Yes, and in fact, we had the UBAS project on Knoll, so it's Knoll, Martway to 67th Street, and we had that originally programmed in our CIP in 2021. And so based on Prairie Village's request to CARS, we are pushing that to 2023 to do just that. What we don't, the question to be answered, we had previously shown it in our CIP 100% city funded. We weren't going to ask CARS for the UBAS funding because we have some other big projects, as we know, between Fox Ridge Phase 2 and the Johnson Drive project coming down, and we want CARS to push as much money towards our bigger projects as we can get. And so Prairie Village is testing the waters to kind of see whether the CARS program in general is going to bite at UBAS treatments. So we will make that shift in our CIP and push it to 2023 so we can take advantage of those efficiencies.
Any other comments? So this is an action item, so do we want to take that to council then?
Yes, I recommend consent.
Consent, okay. All right, thank you. The next is an action item, and it's the City Hall concrete repairs.
So needed.
It doesn't have, I just realized it didn't have a name on it, but I'll let John take that one since he's probably most familiar with the quotes.
Sure. I had actually Brent, he solicited a few bids, met with some contractors to repair the brick areas out front and down by the police department, and also the set of steps that come into the front door right here. Contacted 3 contractors, 2 responded, with AR Construction being the lowest bid. They also included the replacement of the black handrails out front that have been rusted. The other bid that we received back from Northern Concrete did not include that, but AR was still the lowest, most responsible bidder, and they had just completed the concrete work down at the farmer's market, so the 3 new pads that were poured down there, they did that for us. but the scope of this work would include, like I said, the bricks in front of this door, the steps, and the bricks down by the police department that leads up to their door.
When will this occur?
He said that he could probably be here in August to do it, so of course it would have to go through and be approved here at council meeting, and then he said that he could probably be here within the month, so.
And as long as the temperatures are warm enough to cure the concrete, we ought to be okay, right?
That might be challenging.
This is great news.
Yeah, thank you, I really appreciate it.
And I assume we're happy with how the work turned out by the farmer's market?
Yep,
Okay.
yep. They did.
Okay, any other questions?
I recommend we take it to the council.
Consent, non-consent?
Consent.
All right, excellent. Okay, the next item is a discussion item, and it will be discussing city communication with the mission businesses.
Thank you very much. So this is a touch point in an ongoing conversation for sure. As you saw in your agenda item, the first kind of step we took was attending one of the Mission Business Partnership meetings. Danielle Sitzman and I attended to kind of talk about the area that is in the downtown district that is the sidewalks in front of the businesses, acknowledging that activating that space, making it feel welcome, inviting customers, showing that you're open, kind of putting your personality out there is very desirable and something that we want to see to increase the vitality of our downtown district, but that there are really no stated rules of the road for what can be done safely and what we would like to see and what we would not like to see in terms of just protecting people and our investment in that area. So the businesses were very receptive, as you've all seen and we've maybe talked about, and everyone's aware of. Different businesses have done different things for different amounts of time, and there are new ideas all the time coming up about ways people can kind of settle in and take advantage of those big wide sidewalks. There have been some concerns, some of the more invasive things like permanent installations of things, like a free library or a pedestal, or drilling into the hardscape, or things like things that might harm outdoor storage, forklift traffic, things like that might harm our hardscape. We're always very interested in maintaining, well, we're required to maintain passing distance, so at least 4 feet for people in wheelchairs or just for the public in general to keep that passable space. The sidewalk is first and foremost a way, means of traversing the space, so we need to have it be passable and safe and welcoming. So we started the conversation with the Mission Business Partnership talking about we just need to be clear, we need to communicate, we need to kind of have an agreed set of guidelines that will work, and they brought up the concept that they do this welcome new member packet. They provide handouts on what they offer as an organization and kind of just a welcome number of items. And we said what would be nice is if we could get something in that packet, and they were all about it and very interested in that. Because there is a lot of information that we sometimes give in dribs and drabs, and sometimes we have more opportunity than others to provide kind of a comprehensive welcome in terms of some of the key information that we hope every business knows. And some business people coming to Mission have had a business elsewhere and are very savvy and know the way to navigate, and some are starting from absolute scratch. And we do talk with them, when we meet them and when they come to City Hall for things. But this is a way to just kind of package it up and organize it. We thought it was important that it be branded from the partnership and approved by the partnership, endorsed by the partnership as things that they know they need to hear, but also that the first impression of this not be punitive. We'd gone down the road of having a kind of permit for any kind of outdoor activity or sidewalk use. And once we had it in our hands, kind of looking at it, thought this isn't the right tone or this isn't the right welcome. And so if we can step that back and provide guidelines like you see in this sheet about activating your sidewalk space and things to consider and things we need to see. But most of all in this document and in the communications we'll have back and forth with the partnership, we hope it is just check in with us first. As we've talked about with other issues, the worst case scenario for us is that someone makes an investment not knowing what can be allowed or not allowed, and then we have to have an awkward conversation, you know, about backing that up or, you know, remaining fair and consistent with everyone else. And that's not what we want to do. We want to encourage the things that they're excited about and make sure that they can do them safely. So we hope, we've heard good feedback so far. This is a draft copy, and so you're kind of the first to see it beyond some of the partnership folks who looked over it in a draft form, but it's not been road tested exactly. We will echo this content on our website, have you know, that sort of landing page, which was one of the recommendations from the Downtown District Task Force that we still, you know, need to execute, but to just, you know, be as clear and upfront as we can about the issues that we come into contact with the most.
Have they talked at all with other cities and what standards they have for the same kind of activity?
We have not done that, I think, as part of ours. We knew about, you know, our key concerns that we wanted to pull out and address, kind of given our unique sidewalk, you know, widths and the things we're noticing, but we have not compared to other cities so far. Good.
Is this just for businesses mainly between Knoll and Lamar?
The sidewalk space is we're thinking that way, but really it is applicable beyond that. Some, you know, I'm thinking of the shopping center, you know, where Kansas Sampler would be, for example. They have that, you know, they would need to be maintaining those passable distances, but then they have property managers who'd be kind of looking over what was allowed there and not. So the general content about how to register your business, those things are universal. The sidewalk space, certainly we wrote it thinking about that downtown district, so we might need to clarify that.
Yeah, I think something like this would be nice to any business that comes into Mission. I know that Brian and I have had conversations about certain businesses that aren't really zoned properly and out of compliance, and I need to get businesses to come in and then get established and tell them, no, you know, you're not.
Absolutely.
In compliance, so.
And we've talked about, and I think also educating, I think sometimes the first people who have contact with prospective businesses are other businesses. You know, they're the neighbors who come out on the sidewalk and introduce themselves when they're looking at a space and things like that. And so if they know that this exists and they are clear on what we hope they know, I think there can be some good passing around of information there. And then I do think too, one of the objectives, especially from the Mission Business Partnership Town Hall meeting, was that we would sort of reach out and have strengthen or, you know, renewed contact with the property owners and the leasing agents and get the education kind of going in all directions that way too. So if everyone knows there's a sheet, you know, there's a sheet, we can go find a sheet, then we can get that out to people.
For sure. All right, does anybody else have any questions or concerns?
Have there been any issues between businesses in terms of how space is being utilized and how one space impacts what one does versus another is impacted?
I don't know that I've heard of, like, you're on my space, like any encroaching neighbor to neighbor, like don't cross the line. But I have heard concerns about just aesthetics or, you know, just, you know, taste issues, but also is that appropriate kind of over exuberant use of sidewalk space has been a concern to some businesses. And at that time, you know, the city really didn't have teeth to say, you know, one way or the other. And so what we hope is that we continue the conversation about what is best for the community. What does this community want to see in terms of aesthetic? What makes sense in that space and what doesn't? And maybe the businesses too can help us get that conversation out. So we're not quite as heavy-handed, but it comes about sort of more naturally. We'll see.
We're going to have a brewery, right?
Yeah, maybe so.
Well, we have a brewery that's made an application to have into the space. Two breweries.
Oh.
Yes.
So I guess the question is, are you going to have tables outside that people could sit?
Yep. And that opens a whole other issue with the legal requirements about delineating where you may have alcohol and where you may not. And so those will all be issues that we're talking about now. And so, yeah, making sure that's clear to everyone.
Is the thought that sort of, once these discussions happen, some of this will be put into ordinance form, or is the idea that it would all sort of maintain at an informal conversation level, or?
We've talked about both. I think informal works until it doesn't anymore. But that would have to be a decision we made kind of more formally, because at this point we went down that road, and then it felt like there at least needs to be a first touch that is more encouraging and less discouraging than that. And because I had the permit, and it was sort of the thing where you look at it, and for the content of the form itself, it just didn't feel right. Like, will you please fill out this piece of paper to be able to put a table out on your, and it just didn't match, I think. But there's the whole range of putting a dog dish out in front to encourage, to just be welcoming, all the way to more extreme things or actual harm to our spaces. So, I think we should test this. Just this we're kind of talking about doing with. Getting in front of everybody and as a group sort of talking about the issue more often and having some clear language down on a piece of paper and see how that goes.
Is the Mission Business Partnership going to take the lead on this in terms of sort of?
Yeah, they will have it in their packet, and then in terms of, maybe we're an item on one of their town hall meeting agendas, or just whatever they recommend in terms of getting it out, but then we can be proactive on our end too, using it. And so we'll kind of do it as a partnership, I think.
I think absolutely the feedback that we heard at that town hall meeting was, let us just sort of almost get out of our way and let us do whatever, we think is best for our business. And so I think what Emily said is right, that if we can do this collaboratively and in an encouraging way, then perhaps we don't have to have the, in an ordinance where it feels like the regulation, and we can use a carrot instead of a stick approach, which would be ideal.
And I could see a scenario where we said, this is great, but in order for it to be safe, if you could just do it this way, or make sure whatever, it's the front, make sure items are secure and don't blow away, or, just trying to, think through those issues before someone goes out and buys something that is really impractical, and just try to give some guidance that way.
So this will be handed out by the partnership, or are we also going to have a stack of them here?
Yes. I think whoever can get to you first, as a new business, we'll have it coming at them from multiple directions, I hope, and then online as well. So I'm hoping someone who's investigating a community and even needs to know where our city hall is would find it on the website, perhaps in the work section of our website.
Okay, so this is a discussion item. Does this go to council or anything, or do we vote on it, or we're just kind of talking about it?
No, our plan is to do that. We do all these things are required, or things that a new business would need to do anyway. And so I don't think it really requires any council action. We just wanted to kind of let you know, and if you, as you look at the form, if there's something that you think is missing or could be added, we can certainly enhance it in that way.
All right, great. Was there any discussion about open air smoking in these locations?
Don't think so.
The ordinance is pretty well covered.
Yeah.
Well, it covers it within a certain distance, I think you're right. So it should.
That did not come up in the few conversations I've had. Just this
No, I think it's 25 within 25 feet of an operable door or window is the restriction in the code currently.
All right, thank you. The next item up is another discussion item. It's the 2018 Residential Street Program. Mr. John Belger.
So as we kind of go through and take in all of the information that we receive from the Stantec inventory, we've been working with our on-call engineers to take this stuff and put it all in one place and get it packaged up to where we can kind of go through and take that information and project out another street program like we traditionally had in the past. So forecast out 5 to 8 years. We had an 8-year plan that basically ran us, the first 8 years of the program. With all this information that we've gotten back, trying to take it, package it all together and put it in the right spots in order to have all that information in one spot as you go from street to street is going to be crucial for us to take that info and plug it in where it should be based on PCIs, conditions of curb, conditions of sidewalk, etc. So we've got that ball rolling. Historically, we've spent approximately $350,000 a year on the residential street maintenance program. That program typically included a mill and overlay program and a seal program of some sort. For 2018, what we're proposing to do is to kind of take those traditional programs and put them on hold for now. This would allow us to take that information and get it packaged up in a way that we can bring it back to you all and say, here's all the information we have, this is what we've done with it, here's how we plan to move forward with a more typical street maintenance program starting next year. So given that, there's a few projects that we've heard about or been approached about over the last couple of years that really don't fit into that traditional program that we think there would be a big benefit in trying to get completed this year. In the discussion item, a couple of those projects would include that sidewalk behind Highlands Elementary off of Cedar that connects the school from Cedar to in between on the north and south sides. There's a 4-foot sidewalk on each side that connects that neighborhood with the school. A few years back, I know a few of you remember the young lady that came in and met with her parents and asked about that. And we've actually received a few phone calls from parents over the last few months regarding those sidewalks. So this was also an area that was included into that safe routes to school study in phase 1. Olson had packaged part pieces of that up and assigned estimated cost to those. We'd like to see if we could go ahead and move forward with that and get that sidewalk cleaned up. Another item that we have is at 60th and Row. There's a ramp on the northwest corner. The problem that we have there is there's a lot of truck traffic that comes through there. They come down from I-35 down Row and get to Johnson Drive and come on through and think that they can get up on China Mission Parkway. The problem that they face when they hit the parkway is the ramp's gone. So what they do is head on up the hill to 60th, head west to gain access to the parkway. So what that's done is that truck traffic and the way that corner's set up at the moment, those trucks kind of jump over that ramp and have crushed the curb and the ramp. So what this would do is realign that curb and push that ramp back a little bit and give those trucks some more room to make that corner. Another issue that we've had is in a couple of cul-de-sacs that have been chip sealed. Heavy trash trucks, delivery trucks, and vehicles of that nature that show up in the summertime when it's hot tend to try to make those corners and kind of pull up, back up, and turn on that and end up rubbing the chip seal up. So what you end up with is the emulsion oil bleeds through the chip seal, and you're left with oil showing through the aggregate. That one area in particular is that street right off of Lamar, 52nd Street right off of Lamar. What we're proposing to do is mill that section and overlay it with an asphalt overlay. We had changed our tune a little bit on some cul-de-sacs that we did over in Lido Villas. We chip sealed the straight stretches and poly sealed the actual cul-de-sac piece, which has held up a lot better. Don't know that it's a perfect solution, but it has performed a lot better because you don't get that that same heating up, oil bleeding through phenomenon that you get with regular chip seal. One of the bigger items that we're proposing to do is finishing out the geotechnical inspections on the streets all throughout town. in years past, we have done this type of work on streets slated for mill and overlay only. We do have a chunk of that information from the things that we've done in the past. But what this would do is go ahead and complete this work citywide. So we would have all the information for every street section in town and what's underneath it. The Stantex inventory basically took a picture of what's on top. This would take it a step further and let you know what's underneath. There have been instances in the past where we run into issues with milling a street and then we're left with nothing. You're left with dirt, gravel, clay, and we kind of got to the point of no return in those situations and ended up having to go back and overlay that, and then we saw it fail prematurely just due to the fact that the subgrade wasn't sufficient. Also included in this is a restriping of some specific areas around town. This is kind of a beefed up version of what we typically do. So this would handle some heavily traveled intersections and get those restriped. Traditionally, we've painted these intersections. What this would do is use thermoplastic, which is a lot more durable material. So we kind of start from scratch and get us kind of back to square one with good striping in these areas. And then also, we are proposing some spot curve repairs. Initially, we had planned on doing some longer stretches in some areas that had degraded. The issue that we were having after talking to our on-call engineers were we could do that, but the problem was is if we didn't go ahead with a full depth reconstruction in these areas, then the curb would end up failing prematurely also. So we kind of backed off of that and looked at some areas where the curb was damaged in front of driveways, areas that were holding water in the curb, so they'd sunk, and now they're becoming a water issue. And we've got a list of those and marked some of those out. So we've got quite a few of those to address. So I just feel like if we could do some of these things and take this year as kind of our catch-up year to get caught up on some of those things that seem to have lingered out there for some time, that it would definitely be a benefit for us. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions you guys have.
John, do you know the timeline that it would take to kind of get a proposal for next year?
I'd like to have that information all packaged up late this fall. So we've been working with Woodson to take the information that we've got from Stantec. So we can get all that information in one spot. Still working through the process of what the best spot is, whether that's Excel format or a GIS format. Working through some of that at the moment, and then taking that information and packaging it up to where it's just as clear as it can be. I feel like sometimes I get up here and I start to talking and I start giving everybody too much information, but just get it in a fashion that's understandable, makes sense, and takes all that information and puts it in one spot. That's kind of been the struggle that I've had. Is I've got a PCI rating and I've got curb conditions, and then trying to couple that with the geotech information that we have. I feel like if we can get all that geotech information, I know the whole story. So
plus, I think we're looking at expanding that. Not only do we have the existing condition, but we have the ability to input what treatments have occurred, you know, what we've invested, what's been chip sealed, what's been milled and overlaid, when, so that we really have that complete look at, you know, every segment of street. And we struggled, I think, with the core sampling, the geotechnical piece, but until we know that, I mean, we hear you say to us, what's it all in, if you will? You know, what's it going to take to get us kind of on that right track? And I think until we have some of those really critical pieces of information, it's going to be difficult for us to say whether it's 2019 or the next 5 years or the next 10 years, because I think we look at it with an eye to, you know, the street sales tax is going to expire in the next few years, and before we take on any other really big, you know, programs or projects, we need to have a sense of how we want to approach that, how we want to pay for those things as well.
Well, I think that it's good that you're doing evidence-based kind of setup, looking at what are the priority areas that we need. I don't know if you match that with traffic patterns and things like that too, in terms of activity. But nonetheless, I think it's good that this is the approach you're taking.
John, on that whole timeline, then will you be able to complete and incorporate the new geotechnical analysis as well?
It'll be close.
Okay.
But I think that if we could get them going on that, it doesn't typically take them a lot of time to get that work completed. I think more of the work for them is getting the samples isn't the hard part. For them is trying to package it up and get it to us in a fashion that, you know, makes sense, you know, because we've got some report books that are like this. But I think if we can kind of work with them along the way, instead of taking that step of, you know, generating the paper report, let's get it in the asset management piece. That way we're just skipping a step. We're not having to get the information in a report form and then taking that information and putting it somewhere to get it with the rest of the information.
Sure.
If we can just bypass that step kind of in general and get it in the spot that it needs to be, you know, that'll save us a lot of time.
Go ahead.
I just want to thank you, and I'm really looking forward to a resolve on this 52nd Street cul-de-sac, because it's not only the oil in place that causes issues. These people have taken it through their driveways, through their homes, through their carpeting, and they've been really patient for the last 2 years waiting for this. I'll be real excited to see the resolve on that. There's a lot of people kind of waiting to see what the city's going to do, because they've been really patient for a really long time. But we get calls on that. I mean, Kristin lives there, but I get calls on it probably.
We do too, and again, it's one of those things that I feel like is just kind of hanging out there. And if we can get that crossed off the list, that would be phenomenal. But we're just fixing it.
John, the other thing that I think should be included in your approach is how are you going to communicate this with the residents? I mean, is there going to be a plan to notify the residents how this is going to take place? So that's something I think should be included in the process.
Sure.
To make sure that we're going to communicate.
Yeah.
People know what to expect.
Yeah, I would agree, because the delay, you know, I think there are very good reasons that you've outlined, but some people might not be so happy to hear that, so I think the more we can get out in front on that.
Sure.
The reasons.
In
I agree.
past, you've got to put that out on the website, right? What's going to be over.
Yeah, we have. You know, and I've had the benefit of being here kind of through the whole residential street program process as we kind of got it kicked off. And in my first couple of years here, when we weren't really doing anything, nobody called. Because, I mean, they'd call about pothole or things of that nature. But then as you moved along through the program, the question quit being, you know, hey, I have this problem, when are you going to fix it? It's, when are you going to get to me?
Yeah, where am I on the schedule?
Right, where am I
at
on the list? And the struggle that I've had in the past few years is with things not being suitable for mill and overlay, or, you know, kind of having those questions and finding stuff getting shuffled around, or, I had a hard time answering that question. So I think if we have all the information, you package it up right, and we get that forecasted out, that way I have a solid answer.
Sure.
I mean, there's nothing worse than somebody calling and not having a good answer.
I just feel like with the Stantec, I think we've had those results back for many months, 7 months maybe.
Yeah.
And I just don't know, I haven't seen anything. I don't know. My concern is if we spend another 200 grand on the geotechnical, I mean, how quickly kind of go back to what Sollie's concern was. Can we then mesh that together if it's almost taken 7 months just to get the Stantec information?
I think the struggle that I've had with the Stantec stuff is with some other things out there looming. I haven't been able to dedicate enough time to that specifically.
I'm not trying to be critical.
No.
No, and I think it's twofold. I think it's that time, but I think the results came back, and we talked a little bit about this, I think, of maybe the CIP meeting. The results came back in a way that we really weren't anticipating at all.
Okay.
In terms of when we put the street program together initially, we set this goal of trying to get every street to an average PCI rating of 70 or better. And I think our average PCI rating on the streets overall was 72 or somewhere in the low 70s. When it came back and we started looking at the analysis, the city average went down fairly significantly. And so we've been trying to work through and figure out how we explain that change. So was it because you had human beings basically conducting the inventory in 2008, so it was more subjective than the data that we got in 2017? Is it because they recommend that you do a PCI inventory more frequently than every 10 years? And so how much can we attribute to just natural decline of the streets that happened over a 10-year period? But before we started saying we need to go out, and we actually turned the whole program upside down and said, okay, let's take every street that we haven't touched in the first 8 years of the program, and how far can we do a really large chip seal program and just kind of get everybody caught up and get some treatment done. And there were scores that concerned us about streets being even able to take that chip seal. And so a lot of that delay has been us wanting to be respectful of, before we completely turn the program on its ear, making sure that we understand the data and what it may be saying to us, so that before we come to you and say, let's start down this new path, looking at spending millions and millions of dollars,
Right.
that we really understand, and that we have a goal that makes sense that we can communicate to the public to help us achieve that. And so we would love, we don't want to sit on any of the rest of the results, because we get the same calls that you get in terms of where am I on the list? What is it going to be 2019? Is it going to be 2020? And so we'd like to get there as quickly as possible, but we want to make sure that we can understand, and that we're not just putting data out there that then doesn't make any sense for the future.
I agree. I think it would be outstanding to get some long-term. It would make your guys' lives a lot easier as well.
Oh, a ton. I mean, if I can have a solid answer, I'm all about that. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot to unpackage. I mean, it's just, we've got over 480 street sections, and then they're all assigned an individual score. And we've gone back and said, okay, well, what haven't we done yet? Put them on the list. Where do they fall? What can we do with those? Or, it's just trying to take that information and get it in the right spot.
And I think with the data that we'll collect, with the geotechnical and the Stantec, and having it all in an asset management system that relates to streets, we can answer that question. We talk about, so often we talk about the two questions we have when it comes to the street program, and that is, what needs to be done? And then once we know what needs to be done, when can we do it? How quickly can we move through it? And so I think we feel like with these tools we can get to the what, and then it becomes the much broader conversation about when, and what's our appetite, how quickly can we move through the what.
Are you also including any information about stormwater?
This does not include stormwater information at the moment. We have been in discussions with the county. The county's wanting to do a updated inventory countywide. So they've asked us, what information do you have? You know, what kind of system, you know, what works in conjunction with Ames? How do we package that information? And then they're actually setting aside some dollars for that inventory work. So I think that, you know, that's something that's going to be on the horizon.
And we put $150,000 in the stormwater utility fund in 2019 to do a stormwater infrastructure and asset inventory.
Okay.
So it's in the budget that is proposed and recommended.
So whatever platform you use to build a model, is that GIS, Excel, Access, whatever platform you use, streets, sidewalks, and curbs are one element of assets, along with stormwater, along with buildings. So when there's pieces, each piece has to kind of be worked on, each piece has to be brought up to date. But then when we do get an asset management model, it'll have all our assets in it, and it'll be what in cost, projected cost, and life. So that's the win. So once we get to the end of this, which is going to be a while yet, we will see that picture that you're talking about.
And it may not be in one piece of software because of the difference in the things. I mean, our hope, I mean, I think we can investigate all of that, but we're building kind of, I think the data may start, I mean, I think the building side is a little bit different for us than, I don't know, we've got to look at it. We've started kind of investigating. It seems to be more robust systems for on the buildings and facility side than what we can see, but
what you're trying to get to is a projected cost per year for all your assets, so that you can decide funding mechanisms.
Yes.
Right. And the big question that'll come out of the geotechnical information is, how many streets do you have that are going to require full depth reconstruction? And I think that's a huge question mark that needs to be addressed, because that's the elephant in the room.
Yeah, I mean, and the ones that we've deferred from mill and overlay on the previous programs, we have already estimated in the $7 to $11 million range total. So we know that number is going to get larger when we pick up the remaining streets.
Thank you. This has been very helpful.
I appreciate you guys listening to all my information.
I think everybody's anxious to get this.
I think so.
And I think if we do it right, there's a good news story for what we plan on doing this year too. There are things that are really going to pop and shine, and before and after photos, and things that have been on people's lists for a really long time, and so we'll try to make the most of those.
Well, I think that the issue is we've had a lot of car support, but we haven't had support for all the residential streets, and that's where most of the issues seem to get the squeaky wheel.
Because you get to go outside and see it every day.
I know.
Or every time you pull on your driveway and walk through your curb, it's a constant reminder. So
I mean, we've had residents that are willing to go out and pave the street.
I've talked to them.
I think I might be familiar with
I think I know that.
Yeah.
But I think, explaining that this is the way to get it done right is, going to be key.
Yeah.
And if we have to go out and ask for more money for the sales tax, you know, when that sunsets, I think having that comprehensive thing will be just fun.
I mean, I think if you have the information to back that up,
Absolutely.
then you're doing yourself a favor, for sure.
Excellent.
But one of the big things of that is going for us to be able to successfully say, this is what we've done. This is how we've used the sales tax over the last 10 years. This is what we promised. Here's what we accomplished. And here's our plan for the next period of time.
Fantastic. All right, any other questions for Don? All right, thank you very much. I appreciate it. All right, that concludes the discussion items. The other items will be the quarterly code enforcement update. Bryce Scott.
Yeah, you can scroll all the way down to the bottom there. All the way to the bottom of the agenda.
Oh.
The quarterly updates.
I need one of those every day of my life.
Chris, I've got one thing.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's finance and admin. Oh, good grief. Hold on.
Use an agenda.
Yeah.
Back. Oh,
I'll get
okay.
it, I'll get it.
All right. Next time we'll just send you. Okay, that's what I said. Yep. Okay, so this is our second quarterly report from Code Enforcement, Neighborhood Services. We had a lot of weeds in the spring, not so much summer, now it's really dry. That was a big issue back in the spring when it was still wet. Vehicles are up a little bit this year. We've had a number of calls about recreational vehicles in subdivisions being stored in driveways. There are a lot of one recreational vehicle that can be stored in the back or inside the property, but not the driveway. So we that's been sort of a front and center for us this summer. And then, let's see, nuisances are just that, nuisances. The zoning, we've had a couple of complaints about signs, as well as the issue that Kristin and I have been talking about, particular businesses in violation of zoning ordinance right now. So we're working through that. And then with miscellaneous, this was asked last time, a lot of this is trash cars that are left out after solid waste collection day. Sometimes it's rental license, those we catch. They're actually renting property that don't have a rental license, as well as those that might be doing work in their property without a permit. So rehabbers or individuals that are in there doing work without a permit. Let's scroll down a little bit. Basic comments from last time, we updated this whole section at the bottom of the report. So, notices sent in 2018 to date is 243. Of those, compliance has been about 188. There's been abatement of 8. There's been cases that have gone to court, 4 of those. Total cases is 201. So why there's 201 cases and 243 notices? Sometimes there's multiple notices sent on one particular case. That's why you get more notices sent than you do actual cases. Again, kind of a breakdown of the areas where we've received complaints. Commercial 20. 4 batch of complaint basis from somebody that observed it, and the 16 of them proactive. And then finally, compliance by notice. Somebody had asked, well, what's the percentage of those that actually meet compliance the first time? So the courtesy notice, I'll talk a little about this in a second. 69% will meet compliance after the courtesy notice. 26% will meet compliance after a second certified notice. And then the final notice, 1%. 2% of those are actual work orders that are issued for a particular property issued. And then 2% actually go to court for municipal court report case.
Pretty good average.
Yeah, it is.
This is just the second quarter, right?
Right,
So,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Should it be 1,000 of them?
Well, I hope it's not 1,000.
The compliance is good, though.
Yeah. And then what I handed out was really kind of a primer in code enforcement 101. And there's 2 components. There's the visual component, the flow chart, for those that are more visual. And then there's the second page that's kind of the same written out, a little bit more detail. So of course, there's always a complaint that's issued. We receive the complaint, we assign that to a particular staff individual, James Dorman or Neil Ponska. One of them will do an initial inspection of the property, and then we typically will send either a notice in the mail, it's kind of a courtesy letter, or we'll actually post it on the property itself. And we give between 3 to 7 days for somebody to meet compliance on that courtesy notice. With grass, it's 3 days. With vehicles, it's nuisances is 7 days. If it's an actual exterior maintenance like peeling paint or shutters that are missing or an issue with the roof, awnings, 30 days. At the end of that period.
Can you give me an example of a nuisance of a vehicle that's in the same category? What's a nuisance?
Dog barking?
It could be dog barking, it could be trash, debris around the property, things like that. Oftentimes it's trash and debris. We'll do a second inspection after the first courtesy letter's been sent. Property meets compliance, we're done. If not, we'll go ahead and actually send out a formal certified letter to the property owner. And then again, by code, they have a certain number of days to come to compliance with the issue. For nuisances and vehicles, it's 10 days. Grass is 7 days. And then exterior maintenance at this point is 15 days. And then we'll do an inspection after that particular time period. That's the third inspection. We'll verify the property's coming to compliance. If not, then we'll take action. And that could be either a citation to appear in municipal court and or a work order. With grass is kind of a unique exception. Once we send a certified notice to a property, it's good for the year. And a lot of times with grass, we have repeat offenders. So once we send that certified notice in the spring for the first time, after that, that certified notice is considered good for the rest of the summer until the grass growing season is over.
Wait, can you clarify that? So if you send it in May, and the grass grows up in 2 weeks, it's a foot tall, if it's good for the whole year, how do we send another notice?
We don't. It's going.
We don't have
Just debate it at that point? Okay.
You're considered to put on notice at that point. You need to maintain it, keep up with it. If you don't, we'll just go in there and mow it. So that's kind of our way of getting at the issue of grass sooner and quicker, as opposed to going through this entire process.
On this flow chart, where's the call to the council?
It usually
Sometime right about
happens
here.
between, yes. Well, and I think the biggest confusion or maybe frustration we have is probably between the initial inspection and the second inspection. Because until we send that certified letter, those specific timeframes that are statutory, where Brian's referenced, 10 days for nuisance and vehicles, we can't enforce those until we have sent that certified notice. So when we send the initial letter, which a resident often feels like is a citation, we will be working with them, but we can't really start that official timeline until we have sent the certified notice. And so a lot of times that work and that compliance and voluntary compliance is trying to happen between the initial inspection and the second inspection.
And I think it's important to note, as I've said before, we take a kind of carrot and stick approach. At the end of the day, we want the problem resolved. It's not our goal to send somebody to court. And so we'll work with the property owner. If we feel like they're making some progress towards the ultimate goal, then we'll extend these time frames. And a lot of that can depend on weather, the severity of the situation. Sometimes it's financial hardship. If somebody's having difficulty getting a contractor to get the work done, or they can do a little bit at a time. So we take all that into consideration when we're working through a complaint.
I think it would be helpful to have some sort of council protocol for handling these issues, because oftentimes when I get a call, I will redirect to the city in terms of that's the appropriate place where a complaint ought to be filed. But as soon as we as council members get involved in the middle of a situation uninformed, I think that's where we get into trouble. And so trying to ferret out what what are the two sides of the story, and that would be useful in terms of guidance, I guess, as far as that's concerned.
I think to that point too, a lot of times when we've been, at least when I've been looped in on something, what you mentioned, it's already after it's been reported to the city. I don't know if there's any way that we can somehow get some visibility into open stuff that's out there, or?
You don't want, I'm just going to be very candid and say you really don't want that. And I say that with all due respect. It's and it feels like a, you know, because
maybe some way to get a summary of like a specific thing if we get called on it, right? Instead of just getting a quick phone explanation of, oh yeah, we've already talked to them and they said this. Like, could we get a documented copy of the interactions that have happened so far between the city or whatever in that case? I don't know how possible it is, but.
Or do we just, you know, I always feel like I have to take responsibility for it. I've got that customer service background, so I feel like I feel like I'm calling you guys to find out what's going on, and I think there should be a more efficient way to get it done, and I'm not sure if I should just tell the homeowner or whoever is making the initial complaint to work with, you know, Brian Scott, or...
Well, just to make sure that we don't give the wrong information.
Yeah, because I always worry about that.
I want to be able to represent that accurately and not tell somebody that, oh yeah, the city's going to do something that I hope that they're going to do or something else. Just so we can be black and white about it.
I think that would be ideal if you could have the property owner call the city, you know, myself or Neil or James, and talk to them directly. If we can give them an update of where we're at in the process on the property, kind of next steps that are anticipated.
Yeah,
it takes a little bit of middleman out of the situation.
The trickier part is when we get the calls that are not from that property owner, that are from their neighbor that have a problem. And,
well,
you know,
who's ever initiated a complaint,
sure.
Yeah.
So I like the fact that you guys are taking the soft approach to begin with, because I think most issues can be taken care of. So I like that. But if you look on here, one of the keys that I have found is there needs to be, I think as council, we should only get involved if the process breaks down. So when we get a call, either they have called the city or they haven't. So you guys know about it or you don't, or we're the first contact. If we're the first contact, then we report it in, you guys start this process. One of the keys I have found out is there a process to communicate back to the person who made the complaint? Because if you look, just for brass, for instance, so you've got the initial soft approach takes 3 days, then you've got 7 days to do the notice, and then you've got another 7 days to the violation, and then you've got 2 days to abate. So after somebody calls, there's 17 days that go by. And I think in that meantime, if we haven't communicated to the person who's made the complaint, they think we've ignored them. And that's when I think the trouble starts. That's when people think the process may be working, but people think the process is broken down. So do we communicate back to the people that make the complaint? Because if it's a maintenance thing, it's 30 days, but, you know, I mean, it takes some time.
If we're lucky enough that they actually give us their name and phone number.
Well, but many,
I know it's fair too.
Yeah, I mean, I agree.
A lot of times people don't want to snitch on their neighbors, you know, by what you know.
But there's at least 2 cases we know, that I know I've been involved with, where it's been ongoing, it's going to take some time, but the neighbors don't seem to be, the people who are making the complaint don't seem to know what's going on, and so they call again out of frustration. You know, I talked to you guys, what's going on? Well, we've made an inspection, we've done the notice, we actually have a court date. Well, they don't know that, so do we have something in our process where that communication goes back so that they know? On the grass thing, it's going to be 17 days before we do anything, but that seems like an eternity when you're looking at a foot high grass, you know. So to me, communications is the key, because if they call us, we refer it, there's action taken, there's communication back to the homeowner, we're out of it if the process is working. But if there's no communication back, then they call us again, then we make the loop again. And I think, and you guys don't want that. You don't want us keep looping in, because I don't think that we add value to the process.
But I also think that that's the issue of protocol. I think that redirecting anybody that gives a complaint to us have you call.
Right.
You know, rather than we having to call and make the report, it should be they making the report to the city.
Well, and I don't mind making the call, but what I tell them is, okay, you know, let's get somebody out there. So I call in or say, hey, there's been an issue. And I tell the homeowner, you know, somebody's going to come on site, they're going to check it out, and then, but somebody has to get back to them. So that's the protocol.
I think it's
Right.
managing, I think it's figuring out how do we manage the expectations for the length of time that it may take, or, you know, yes, or just that confirmation. And I think there's a way, there may be some ways to do that that aren't really, I mean, that aren't terribly labor intensive. And some people don't care, but I think having something like this is even helpful to be able to say.
Well, this is the first step. I
Yeah.
talked to myself, we can probably post this on our website.
Yeah.
Information. And I think we can call, if we know who it is that's making the complaint, we can certainly call them back and let them know what's going on. I would hope that James and Neil are doing that. I think that's not the case. Yeah, I think to the next level, there are systems out there. This is not a situation that's unique to Mission. Other cities have dealt with this too. There is software out there where it actually tracks the complaint process. So if you're a complainant, you call in, and it'll give you a number, and that number tracks the case. And you can actually check on the website and see where it's at. But there's a lot of data input with that system. You're constantly putting in information about where you're
I
at.
think we can make it simpler.
I think if somebody is known, files a complaint, there's just a feedback loop that tells them, we found a violation or we didn't find a violation. Because some things people think are violations.
Right.
The pool that's out in the front yard, well, that wasn't a violation. But a lot of people thought it was. So you got to come back to the homeowner, or the complainant, and say, well, that's not a violation. What? What do you mean it's not a violation? That's crazy. Well, or it is a violation, and we have sent notice, and if it's not remediated in whatever the process is, then we're going to do that. I mean, just let them, include them in, and I think that'll calm it down. But I don't think we should get in the middle, because
I agree.
we're in an area that we're not trained
I
to do.
agree.
Now, if the process breaks down and the homeowner doesn't get,
Right.
then they're going to call you back. I always tell them, call me back if you know you still have an issue after you talk to the codes people.
Okay.
And most people are fine. There's a few that don't like the interaction, but I think the feedback communication is key. And because we're doing the right things, we just got to let them, the homeowner, know who's complaining that we took your complaint serious. We have a process. Here's our process. There's a due process to the people that are trying to get remediated, and if they don't, then there's a court date, there's abatement, there's steps. And if you tell people that, manage the expectations, then they know it may be 17 days for grass, which seems like a long time.
Yeah.
What are we doing if you're aware that someone's regressing and they do have a financial hardship? How are we responding? I mean, you don't want someone that's financially up in arms to have to go to court and pay more money. I mean,
Well,
what are we doing?
If it's grass, hopefully they can do that themselves. That's not really much of a financial hardship situation. I mean, ultimately, if they don't do it, we're calling a work order in to our contractor to go in and abate the property. If they're not able to pay that, that'll wind up being an assessment on the property tax bill for the following year. Now, typically the issue with financial hardships is more exterior maintenance issues with the house. We'll actually work with the homeowner, try to get them to one of our grant programs to help them buy and reduce price. Maybe even hire a contractor to do some work.
Good volunteers.
Sometimes we try volunteers like Boy Scouts or somebody, the gardens we cleaned up or something. Yeah.
But I mean, and you can see if you go back to the sheet. So if you look at just in the second quarter, the Code News of Interest section, it's that Mission Possible. So that's the grant program, and that encompasses everything. So we approved 10 applicants in the second quarter of the year for financial assistance to help resolve a code issue. So we can track, that here as.
So when someone applies, is it just one, like an issue specific, or is it for a term of time?
It's mostly issue specific.
And it's generally in response to, maybe it gets started because we've gone out in response to a complaint or proactively initiated a code enforcement case on that. And then through the course of that process, we understand that someone is physically or financially unable, and then we can sort of direct them as appropriate to that mission possible.
I know that you can go into the website and report a concern, and you have to put your name, your address, like your email, and stuff like that. And then you can request to put a response back that says call me or email me, and I don't know if that's happening, or is it? I'm not sure.
The response part, get things coming in or responses going back, or both?
Yeah, because you can report a concern.
Yes.
And it will ask you the location and
Right.
then your contact information. And then you can request either a phone call. I'm assuming it's back to whoever made the initial complaint.
Right.
And then I'm not sure if that's happening or...
Was she getting Emily? Or
Yes, I mean, I see the communication among staff between James and Nilo and myself with, I'll take this one, because they do the work between them, and then I'm not positive. They have the information that comes in through the field, so they have the contact information there. I don't know their individual work pattern about what they do with their response.
I wonder how often people actually put their legit contact information there too.
No, it does. And then I know we had that YourGov or YouGov or something like that app if we're...
I'll tell you the biggest issue that we have with that is it's optional on whether people leave their information or not, and 9 times out of 10, they don't. So that was always the issue that we kind of had with that. And then sometimes a lot of the issues that came in were on like Shawnee Mission Parkway. So trying to circle back with them and say, that's KDOT or something like that. And that made that difficult. And then we'd get a phone call and say, hey, I submitted this via the app. And I said, well, it's KDOT area, and we didn't have any kind of contact to get back with me. So, and then they go, okay. So.
Well, I think this is a good start for sure. I appreciate all this work that you did on it. Okay, and then, Brian, thanks so much for that. And then Nick has something regarding, is it appropriate for, okay, if you want to go ahead and take that on there.
Yeah, no, this one wasn't formally on the agenda. It was more just a quick update discussion item. You guys should all just got a copy of the letter that got passed around. Just kind of a quick update. We've been continuing our meetings with the Friends of the Mission Dog Park group, and we've had some pretty good meetings and pretty good turnout and engagements in those meetings too. And one of the next steps that we've gotten to is we want to start engaging the community a little bit more and just get some initial feedback on kind of their interest level or possible concerns about some of the locations around the city as we continue to explore our options there. So before we sent out a survey or any kind of communication to residents, we just wanted to bring it up with the committee here that we were planning on doing that, making sure there weren't any huge concerns about sending something out first, specifically mentioning Mohawk Park, Broadmoor Park, and Streamway as possible options, and just start getting some of that initial feedback from actual residents.
Can you clarify for me, Nick, maybe I just forgot this. Once we identify a park as a dog park, can it not be used for everything else, or is it integrated with all the rest of the community activities?
Well, typically when you have an off-leash dog area, it's a fenced-off area that's, you could go walk around in that area or do something else, I suppose.
I mean, if it's a park where we had equipment and stuff, they can still use it, right?
How many acres are you looking for a dog park?
Really the smallest, especially with the community our size and the traffic we're attending, acre and a half plus, I would think is the smallest we want.
Pretty much take the park.
There are places though where not necessarily the whole park has to be converted to dog park.
Right, because you could fence a
Part of
portion
it
of it, couldn't
could
you?
still be used for other uses, yeah, absolutely. Or if there's maybe a shelter that's out there that is used for picnics or whatever, that might still be outside of the fenced off area.
Are those discussions taking place in your committee right now?
Absolutely.
About portioning it off versus the whole park?
So I don't think we need any, I don't know if there's any formal process to get approval or anything. It sounded like there was, I don't know where.
No, I think the question is, as I understand the conversation that's been occurring, is before you put a public survey out that lists any location as a potential location and ask somebody to comment on it, on those lists of the parks that they've identified in Mission, is there anything that you aren't comfortable with them putting out there publicly? Are you interested in feedback on all those locations?
Yeah.
I guess my only thought was, and I could be confusing the parks now, was that Streamway was not feasible due to its site like parameters, and so I worry that if you get a bunch of people that are like, oh, I like Broadmoor how it is, so I'm going to say Streamway, when the committee really knows that's not like feasible, if that could be run into issues later on, if it's like, well, 70% of respondents said they wanted Streamway, but we've known it won't work there.
Yeah.
I didn't know if there's any of that.
No, that's a good point. I don't think it's just going to be as simple as which one of these three parks work best either. I think it's going to be, for each of these locations, what are some things you might like about this, or some concerns you might have about this, kind of gauge some interest there. So.
Are they looking at other parks outside of Mission?
We are still working on some other potential things, but we haven't really gotten much other participation from the neighbors yet. I know there's still a county spot that we're talking with, and we're going to have another meeting pretty soon here. So, it's really just to engage some initial stuff. It's not to say send out this survey and then we're going to set that in stone on where we want to move forward.
So these are the three that they're looking at in Mission?
Yeah, and to your point about Streamway, I know Streamway had a lot of concerns about just the access to it was a big problem.
And I thought that was actually owned by KDOT, okay.
Not by KDOT, it's owned by the apartment complex.
The access.
Oh, okay.
Access to
Well,
it,
I know
so-
the access is, I didn't know if that land was actually owned by KDOT. I thought it
There's
was
some
ownership.
ownership issues with that park, but that doesn't mean that it couldn't be, I think the access is more a limiting factor potentially than the ownership.
Is there a requirement? I mean, could people come from all over the county to use our dog park?
So we're still working on that part. The hardest part about all this is until you have a location picked out, you don't know what some of those limiting factors are going to be. So, if we end up with a place that's going to be a little bit smaller, more constrained park, I think we'll have to put some kind of limits, some kind of membership system in place to restrict some access, because otherwise it will get overrun pretty quick. Kristin, when we met with some of the people from Leewood and was it Gladstone? Grandview. That was some of the problems that they had is they get overrun sometimes, and you really have to, I think, gauge that based on your estimated traffic and the size of the park. So the smaller the park is, the more likely we're going to have to put some kind of a limiting system in place.
Where are you now in the process?
Getting to the point where we want to send out a survey. I mean, honestly, it's been really challenging without having a location pinned down. To go out and start trying to even do any kind of fundraising or outreach there without a location, it becomes pretty problematic. So I think we really need to get one or two locations narrowed down and really put some, maybe an A/B scenario, and just say, here's what we think it would cost in this place versus that place. Here's what we might be gaining, here's what we might be losing, and probably get it back up through Parks and Rec and then up to the council to vote on whether or not we want to move forward with that.
Who's the survey going to? All Mission residents?
We've got I know there's a list that they've been collecting, people registering on our Facebook page, and then Emily, did they reach out to you? Did anyone reach out to you yet?
I don't believe so. Not since the last meeting.
I'll follow up on that too, because I think they were going to reach out to you about possibly using the same list that we have, that we send the other surveys out to Mission residents.
Yeah, and that goes beyond probably the residents, but we did specify.
Sure.
Yeah.
But if you have a Mission magazine going out next month, that may be a little caveat to put a little notice to put in there that we're looking at that if you have opinions one way or
And
another.
that has been in the newsletter, in the Mission magazine. It was in the last one for sure. I think it was the last two magazines.
Can you do a poll on nextdoor.com?
Yeah, that might be another place to throw out there. If nothing else, I was planning, if we put a survey up, I was planning on making sure that we post some stuff about it and link back to that survey.
Or even if it's a link.
Yeah, you probably want it to be consistent so we have all the
Yeah,
data.
Yeah.
No matter how we end up doing this, my recommendation is that you serve as a representative for the council. Not only you've
Sure.
been on the committee, but you
Yeah, absolutely.
investment in this.
Yep.
Because I think it's not like a pilot project, we've never done anything like that, but it's good to have a conduit with the council, I think, that would be good.
Yeah, absolutely. And Hillary's been involved and Kristin's been involved too, but I've kind of been heading that up. So, And then Christina Farmer, who came and spoke to us before, is the head of our group. She's been doing a good job pulling some of this stuff together.
So one of your funding issues may be a fence, right?
Might be, yeah. We are looking to, once we figure out what kind of space we're going to be talking about and what the location is, I think we've got some good plans to start doing a lot more business outreach and just private fundraising outreach, but it's really challenging without knowing how big of a spot and what other amenities might be needed. If we end up going to a place where there's no water or anything right now, or maybe there's an issue with parking, we've got to look to add parking, and those things all become big variables in the project. So,
Thanks for the feedback.
yeah.
Can we have a preview of the questionnaire before it goes out?
Sure. Make sure you get that together.
All right, any other questions for Nick? All right, thanks, Nick. All right, then lastly, our department updates. Flora.
I have a couple, but if you don't mind, we've got some guests here for the Finance and Admin Committee meeting, and so I'll save until the end of that meeting and go over them.
So do I need to conclude this?
Yes, I'm sorry, yes, so we can adjourn the community development.
I didn't want to skip you, Laura.
No, I'm sorry.
All right, that concludes the community development committee meeting.
All right, well, in that case, I will go ahead and call to order our Finance and Administration Committee meeting for July 11th. Two guests that we're
Yep,
waiting on?
we do. I'll give them a chance to come on. Correct, sorry. Yeah, that is not good for them, so I'll just kind of do a quick introduction. Sure, please.
All right. So our
Yep, or you can, here, why don't you sit right here.
Our first item is a resolution of intent to issue IRBs for Keith and Associates.
Yes, thank you. The mayor and I recently were contacted by Dr. Bill Keith, who's here with us this evening. And I think, is it Keith plus this, or is it Keith and Associates?
Keith and Associates.
Okay,
Yep.
we never know whether it's a plus sign. Who have the current dental practice in the 6299 dental building, office building, and have for many, many years. They had approached us about a letter of support for a small business administration loan application that they were submitting, and so had the opportunity to share with us about their plans for the building and a project and an expansion. And at that time asked us whether we felt comfortable putting the issue or the possibility of issuing IRBs to receive a sales tax exemption on a council agenda. And as we discussed that, we felt like that was something that would be worth the council's consideration. So I'm going to stop here. Dr. Keith is here. Evan Fitz with Pulsinelli, who you've seen before, and I'm sorry, I don't know.
Matt Moyer with Pulsinelli.
Okay. Are here. So let them talk a little bit more, obviously, about the plans and the project and that request, and then we can all be available to answer any questions you might have.
So I'll go ahead and briefly get us started. I'm Evan Fitz from Pulsinelli Law Firm. Appreciate you having us here tonight. I was introduced to Dr. Keith through a mutual friend, real estate broker, that he had contacted about this new investment and opportunity that his business is having there at its current site. When they first approached me, they said, we're looking to make this significant investment and the next step in our business and really take things forward. We're a little bit outside of our comfort zone. We're not real estate developers, and we want to do this the right way. We have a vision for this property and a vision for our business. Is there anything that you can do to help? So started talking to him a little bit about the property acquisition and tools that could be available for someone who wanted to acquire this property, remodel it the exact same way that I would have that discussion with a real estate developer coming through and doing this on a speculative basis or looking to redo a building, something like that. And so basically we started talking a little bit about the opportunity. I started hearing a little bit more about what it was they were planning to do. And the gist of it was, they've been located in the city since 1983, right? Bill's father, been here for a very long time. been in their current building since 1991, have grown their own business, have watched things around them happen in the building, maybe went out and explored some other opportunities out in the Kansas City market, but of course don't want to go too far from home, their client base, and don't want to disrupt the business in any way. So rather than going out and maybe finding a new space in a different area, a newer building, something like that, the idea was put forth, well, we have a good building here, it's in a great location, we have a good business here. Could we purchase the building, upgrade our offices, remodel the building, make it nicer, bring in, more tenants, better tenants over the years, create something that is a nice investment for the city that's on a very nice corner of the city on a very major thoroughfare that runs through here. So we started talking a little bit about their plans, and I'll let him talk more. I'm not the right person to talk about their business and history, and I'll even let Bill talk about the plans for the building as well. But started talking a little bit about their investment structure and what it was they would like to do. The short of it is they were looking to purchase the building, at approximate prices outlined in the application document, which I think you've seen. Purchase the building for approximately $3 million, put approximately another $2.5 million into it, major exterior improvements, glass, things that you'll see from the street, things that will improve the environmental condition of the building, create energy efficiency. Then, of course, upgrade their own space, relocate within the building, do a nice outfitting of that, and upgrade the interior systems of the building so that, they can make it more marketable to future tenants and current tenants. There's no desire to get rid of anybody who's in there presently, but the goal with a building like this, I think it's safe to say you go look at it from the street, you go take a look around inside, it's a little tired. It's not blighted, it's not the end of the world, but it looks like it could use a little bit of a facelift and updating to bring it into the modern era. So that was kind of exactly what they proposed. So they started looking at construction costs and the things that they're thinking about doing, that budget of about $2.5 million. And one of the things that I alerted them to is the possibility of utilizing an IRB to offset their sales tax. In an investment like this, which is a commercial remodel, both their commercial labor on a commercial remodel project is taxable, plus their equipment, materials, outfitting, all of those things. So there is the possibility to have them realize on a $2.5 million investment with a sales tax exemption, maybe a savings of $250,000, somewhere in that neighborhood. Enough suffice it to say that it might change their level of what they're trying to accomplish with that project, their comfort in doing it. Again, this is something where you're going from a successful family-owned business, a dental office, into a major real estate investment, a landlord. And so getting them comfortable with that, getting their lender comfortable with that, all those things are what we talked about. I have worked with the city previously and have in many other cities in similar circumstances and have seen this tool used very successfully for all manners of real estate development. It's something that allows projects to kind of go the extra mile and get things done. And in this case, it's a unique opportunity for a local business to utilize a tool that is commonly utilized in the real estate development market. So it seemed to me like it was a good idea. I approached Laura about it, and we had a good discussion about it. We just asked if it was something that the city council would be willing to consider. So we're here before you tonight. We just wanted to lay that out. I'll turn it over to Dr. Keith, let him tell you a little bit about their business and their plans for the building. But it's all very exciting, very good stuff, and we'd love to be able to have this relatively small level of participation to kind of bring this project to fruition the exact right way that they want to do it. So, thank you.
Thanks, Evan. First of all, I'm Bill. Dr. Keith's my dad. So he started the practice back in '83. There's been a lot of changes both to mission and to our practice in that time. But I guess kind of to start my story is I kind of came at dentistry kind of the backwards route. I didn't want to be the kid that followed in his dad's footsteps because I felt like you had to pave your own path. And then I kind of saw the light thanks to a friend of mine that sat me down one day and said, "What are you doing? Why don't you go to dental school?" And it's the best decision I've ever made. Dad and his partner, Barry Woodson, over the years really grew a phenomenal practice. As we go around to different conventions throughout the country, it's humbling to me to hear some of these people talk about what great dentists they are and what a great practice that they built. And it's awesome to be able to follow in their footsteps. Where we find ourselves now is it's a good problem to have, but it is a problem is we can't get in as many patients as we want to right now. So if you call me for an appointment today, it's going to take 6 months to get in. Maybe if we put you on a quick call list, we can get you in a little sooner, but it's very difficult. So we need to expand our space. Kind of as Evan mentioned, when we started to look at that, I started to realize the numbers that were associated with expansion and creating this new space that we wanted to. And they quickly jumped into the 7 figures, which was something that kind of set us back at first, but we became comfortable with it, but we weren't comfortable doing it in a place that we did not own. If I don't have control over my building, then I don't have control over my future. And if I'm going to put this big investment in, then how, what if the landlord tells me in 10 years that I'm kicked out? That doesn't make a lot of sense. So we started to go down the path of buying a building that wasn't even for sale, which I don't know if any of you have ever done that. It's not an easy process. But thanks to our realtor, Evan, other Evan. Another Evan. Yep. We were able to succeed, and that's really been interesting. But we've also wanted to improve the building. Kind of a aside, my dad proposed to my mom saying that he wanted to be the mayor of Mission one day. He said, "I'm not going to do this alone, Linda," and he never became mayor of Mission at this point, but Mission's always been an important part of our family. I bought one of my first houses in Mission and lived here for the whole time I was in dental school, so Mission's very important to us, and we wanted to keep our business in the community, and we enjoy all that Mission provides to us, and really appreciate how willing you guys were to come out to the practice and have a conversation on something that I didn't even know was a possibility. So what we'd like to do is bring the building up to kind of the standards that you'd see if you've all driven down Knoll towards 435 and you see those new creative planning buildings. Obviously it's not going to be anything that large, but we'd like it to look something like that. If you've driven down Shawnee Mission Parkway and seen what they've done at Carbank or 1900 building, our plan is to use the same contractors that they use down there. So really just taking what was an awesome building in the 70s, I mean this was the NCAA headquarters for years, and turn it into something that is once again kind of an icon of the community. And in the meantime, allowing us to grow our space so that we can treat more patients, see more people, and then bring more quality tenants to Mission. So with that, if you guys have any questions or anything.
Please tell me your dad's not retired.
He's not retiring. He's there on the days when his hands aren't shaky. Just kidding. No, he's awesome. I sit right next to him so I can try and learn how to get a little better each day. But we have a great time. I think when I initially bought the practice from him about a year ago, his plan was to cut back to 3 days a week, and that hasn't happened yet. And I don't see it ever happening. And I think my mom might strangle him if he did stay home all the time. So we have a great time. Melanie Beck is also with us, is phenomenal. So it's it's a great place, and he's not going anywhere anytime soon. So.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
On the application, we need to submit the application itself. Are you going to be asking for bonds on just the building portion of this? It's a $6.1 million project, right?
Well, so there was the purchase of the building, which was about 3.
Right.
And then the plan is right now it'd be about 2.5 in improvements. We put a little buffer in there because with construction things can get interesting. And so we put that buffer in there, but that would be both for improvement of the building and then also the build out of our new space.
Okay.
So the sales.
Maybe I can respond to that part too.
Sure.
So, we'll work to structure it with Gary Anderson. We wanted to lay out the full picture of the budget and cost profile for the whole project in the application. What Gary will commonly do is the bond size may end up being only the construction work and the materials. I mean, there's no requested property tax abatement or anything like that. So we'll probably end up sizing it smaller than the full $6 million. Sometimes he likes to allocate like a little bit of land into the transaction, but that's really just form over substance.
the other question I had was in the part where it says attached sets of following items, certified copies of your audit and most recent annual and quarterly financial report. I know that the answer is that it's not applicable because it's a new entity. Is there any pro forma or financial information with regards to the prior owner's business in terms of
I have the prior owner's financials. I would say that they're somewhat not applicable. I'd be happy to share anything. However, the reason I'd say that they're not so applicable is with the improvements, the building has changing dramatically. And another side of that would be the financials of our dental practice, I guess. So
the IRBs would be through the city, but the city would have no liability for the IRBs.
Right.
So the financials are somewhat.
Well, I think it does go to perhaps, the need and also the value of the value of the project and the need to complete your vision versus what you have available through other sources. But
right, I guess the way I can put it is we have a budget and we only have so much money that can be spent. We're not like some developers that come in and have somewhat unlimited dollars. We have a very strict budget, and that's one that's taken a while to get comfortable with. And if we can avoid paying some of that in the taxes, then we can then allocate that to improvements.
This is something probably you don't have, but in terms of our own policy, the city council policy on issuing bonds, the approval conditions for bonds, for private placed bonds, the applicant must provide reasonable assurance that the bonds are secure and marketable to sophisticated investors, approved by the city, and that the bond issue complies with the applicable state and federal law. So the question I had is basically, what assurance is there that you have the profitability to be able to take this on as a project?
So,
and if there's an assurance that these bonds can actually be sold.
So these bonds, and I'm out with I've reviewed all your policies at various times. I'm not sure exactly what we're referring to, but these bonds, the IRBs, as opposed to actual revenue bonds, like for example the ones being used on the Mission Mall project or something like that, they are conduit financing only. And what that means is the entity that is the development entity, WAC development, will be on all sides of the transaction. So what will happen is the city will enter into a lease-back with WAC development, through which the city takes a legal position in the property, which is required under state law to get the sales tax exemption. And then WAC will finance through a series of transactions with the intermediary bond trustee that will sit between us and the city. We will finance these construction costs. So what happens is, I'm going to use a fictional amount of money here. We're going to do $1 million worth of windows on the project. So what happens is, instead of just paying our contractor for the windows, we will pay the bond trustee on behalf of the city, who will then pay the contractor the $1 million. So we have done, $1 million hasn't gone anywhere. We just have paid it to a bond trustee who's then paid our contractor. At the time we pay that, $1 million of, I'm going to say hypothetical, $1 million worth of hypothetical industrial revenue bonds are issued that we are now the owner of. So we have purchased them. We have satisfied the marketability test because we've gone out and bought them. Under the lease-back structure, the payments on our lease are the principal and interest on those bonds. So we're obligated to pay the principal and interest, but we are the party who is obligated to get paid the principal and interest. So what all that ends up happening is it's a complicated set of documents. Make sure that my friend Gary Anderson remains employed. And what we do is a series of waivers and cancellations of these various payments that basically acknowledge we're doing this solely for the purpose of the sales tax exemption. These bonds have no, in theory, it is actually City of Mission, there's a bond issued. in theory, I guess you could go sell this on the open market, but there's not a buyer for it. It's not marketable. It just is solely a state law mechanism that provides this conduit financing. Sorry, that's a really long-winded answer there, but.
I had a question on some of our other, you're talking about the large developer projects. On some of those projects, they've attributed a value to them for the IRBs. And, in exchange, you can think of that as a trade-off of what the city would otherwise receive in the sales tax. And so I was wondering if you've calculated that number, could get us that number.
I think the rough savings, so if you assume that the number $2.5 million in construction costs, taxable labor, building materials, and outfitting is correct, the city sales tax rate is 9.15? So approximately 9%, it's $225,000 plus or minus is the value to the project of this improvement.
And that's for the city component.
That is the
all-in
sales
city.
tax.
So
So the city's
city's
portion
2%.
is,
Not even, 1.675% of that.
yeah, so the city's portion is maybe,
Okay.
of the total contribution is maybe, $30-some thousand,
Okay.
somewhere in that
That's what I was,
area.
trying to get a sense of. Okay, great.
Laura,
Yes.
how many other projects do we have that have the same process going on with IRBs?
We have, in my tenure here, we've used IRBs for sales tax exemption for, that was before me, so you may have used them. Just in the last 10 to 12 years, we've used them at Mission Crossing. I believe we've used them at Cornerstone Commons. We use them on the EPC project. We've used them on the Gateway project. We use them on the Mission Square project. It's been a fairly standard component of all of the larger developments that we've approved in the last several years.
So the part that I would maybe add to that is I think that this one's a little different in that, it's, at least to my knowledge of those deals, we're just a small business. I assure you, the thought of $6 million deal keeps my wife and I up at night. More so her, but she wakes me up. So this is not, we're not coming here and asking as somebody that's going to do a project here or a project there. We're going to do a project in Mission. The question is, how big a project are we able to do? And so, as much as the city's able to help us and contribute on your guys' part, that just helps us do more and hopefully bring more value to the city. And that's how we look at it. This is, sure, there's going to be money made at some point, but this is more about kind of like following in a legacy of footsteps and also, supporting our community. So it's not we're not the big guy. We're the little guy that's trying to figure out what the big guys do.
Is it 6 million or 4 million? 4 million's in the documents that I'm reading.
So what we did is the resolution of intent includes a number not to exceed 4 million. And so that captures those costs. It's not the 6 million because they're actual building acquisition. So we want to make sure we've got it captured broadly enough for the labor, as Evan mentioned, and the materials. And so again, we capped it at 4 million.
Okay, all right, thank you.
If you can't discuss this, I totally
Sure.
understand, but have you thought about expanding not the clientele, but more the tenant base, so you would have a dentist and an orthodontist in the same building?
Yes, I have. So the plan as of now, well, definitely what's happening for sure is Walt's Teatrick is moving out of our building and they're moving over here to the Security Bank building, just off Johnson Drive. And so at that point, we will move our office and take over the whole 3rd floor that's currently there. That's that $1.5 million. That leaves our current space vacated. That's already built out for a dentist. I can't tell you who I've talked to, but I've talked to a lot of orthodontists. I've talked to a lot of endodontists, root canal specialists. Hopefully none of you have to see them. And periodontists, or gum and bone specialists. So kind of, our vision is that we could make this kind of a dental hub of the city. We can't do that immediately because we already have tenants in place and, they're great tenants at this point. But over time, we would be trying to seek out people that kind of fit the mold, so if I tell you you need to go have a root canal, you don't have to drive down to 435. Right. And so I think that that makes a lot of sense. There's, you know, on note of that, there's not really very many dental specialists in Mission. We've got oral surgery, and as far as I know, I think that's the only specialist in the city. So if we could bring that, this is kind of an area where we don't have a lot of that.
This is a great project.
Thank you.
We're very supportive of it.
Thank you.
We're just trying to do our due diligence.
And I appreciate that. Trust me, I've done a lot of it over the last few months.
Having worked years and years ago, my first job was with small business administration. If you want to see the background they have to go through, it's amazing.
That was, there was a lot of paper there. My banker walked into the closing with this.
Wow, so thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you guys. I appreciate the time.
Any recommendations?
I recommend that we approve the project and we move it to council.
I'm guessing not consent?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Council.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On my birthday.
All right, next up is an action item covering the franchise ordinance agreement from MCI Metro Access Transmission Services / Verizon. Martha,
MCI Metro, a subsidiary of Verizon, contacted us last fall. They want to install fiber in Mission. They knew that they needed a franchise agreement as well as right-of-way permitting once that gets approved. So they have worked with us as well as Dave Martin, their attorneys, working with Dave Martin to draft the franchise agreement that you all have before you. It is very similar to other franchise agreements that we do have in place. They're looking at primarily going underground. They have said that if they are above ground, they'll be going on utility poles and don't have any intention of building out any new structures. They do plan to offer their services to, they said, small to medium businesses and government. And the agreement would be 5% of gross receipts for the current term is 10 years plus 2 extensions for 2 years each. Once the franchise agreement, if it's approved, then they will apply for a right-of-way permit, and that's where they'll work with John Belger and where they want to lay their fiber, and if he has any concerns or so forth, we'll address it at that point through the right-of-way permit.
So they are interested in doing digging?
Yes, they will be digging.
Not existing structures.
Well, I don't think they're going into anyone else's fiber conduit.
No, they may go on poles, so it's either going to be overhead, which we understand they have an agreement currently with KCP&L that would allow that, or putting their conduit underground.
And if they get that right away permit, then they would have access to any existing easements, I'm guessing.
It's on public easement now. Because I know state law a couple of years ago said that you could put up cell towers and like the right of way of people's front yards and stuff like that. I just want to make sure that that doesn't happen.
I think they clearly indicated in the letter that we got that they're not looking at
It
construct
sounds
anything
like
else
it,
out
yeah.
right now, but,
What's the impact on your staff, John?
Mainly just me. You know, we've gone through it with Google, we've gone through it with SureWest, which is now Consolidated Communications. Their build-outs were, I'd say, a lot more impactful, just because they built out the entire city. Talking to these folks, and they typically don't want to tell you very much, but it sounds like their intent is to focus more on business and government facilities. So chances of getting your yard dug up would kind of be slim given that, but try to vet all the construction stuff through the right-of-way permits, and I know a lot of times it's not very convenient just because they're kind of right on top
not been the cause of some of these stormwater collapses, have they?
We had one issue with Consolidated back in 2000, I think that was 2012, but they said, get a contractor, get it fixed, and pay for it. And they did. So, they're usually really responsive to any issues that we have as far as maybe is concerned.
Kristin, I had asked Flora that same thing about what if they start, wanting to do all sorts of crazy things above ground, and Flora, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you said that is covered not in this franchise ordinance, but in the actual right-of-way permitting process is when all of that would be addressed.
Yes.
Very big deal.
And the other thing is that they're, as we understand it, and we know they're currently working through franchise agreements in other communities. And so I think what they've indicated to Martha was that until they get, from a timing perspective, until they get all the correct franchise agreements in place, then I think they know where they're going, how they're building out. We may be just a community that they pass through, quite honestly. It's because we don't have a sense of what that larger build-out plan is. So that will be forthcoming once they get through the processes in other cities as well.
Recommendation?
Yeah, recommendation to council.
Yeah, I say consent.
All right, that's all the action items we have. We have one discussion item. Recommendation of the 2019 budget.
Yes, thank you. So it actually feels really great to be at July 11th and feel like we're standing on the doorstep of a recommended proposed budget that doesn't require a lot of angst to get across the finish line potentially. So I'm happy. This is really one of the biggest things that is new since the last time we had a conversation on the budget is we did get the final assessed valuation numbers from the county, which is what allowed us to really go in and kind of crunch the numbers. And Brian did that on looking at how that relates to the property tax lid and our ability to retain mill. We were able, as the memo indicated, to maintain the same mill levy. So we've adjusted in the budget, in the general fund, you'll see an adjustment upwards from what you had seen in a previous version of that budget. So that adjusts your revenue on the mills that stay in the general fund as well as the mills that are transferred to the capital improvement fund to support the street program. And if you caught my typo in the memo, I gave us credit for $10 million in mills. I fixed that in the version that went today. So again, I'm happy really to kind of run through or answer any questions. We actually saw final valuation numbers that were higher than what the appraiser presented to us in February of this year. They were estimating, I believe, about $150 million total assessed valuation, and we ended up with $157 million, or about 12.86%. They were projecting just under 12% in February. So one mill in the 2019 budget generates approximately $156,841. So again, we were able to take advantage of that growth in assessed valuation primarily because of increases in the police department expenses, because increases in law enforcement expenses we're able to exempt those from the property tax lid calculations. So that was certainly one of the things that helped us to be able to take advantage of that. Again, they're really in the general fund and the funds that support the CIP. I did make some changes which I redistributed in the capital improvement fund, street sales tax, special highway, and the stormwater utility fund that I sent today. We had duplicated street program expenses in the 2018 budget, and we had $175,000 in expenses that shouldn't have been there. So rearranging those was really all I did not impact anything that you had seen in terms of projects or things that we are able to do either in 2018 or 2019, but just got those aligned, those two plans aligned. All the supplemental requests remain in the budget. We have heard and are making progress in our conversations with the other communities relative to the provision of contractual animal control services. We, at this point, all of the current NEAC member cities are interested in contracting with us in 2019 for that service. Roland Park was a question mark at our last meeting, and since that time they've made the decision. So we circulated and are circulating, we've circulated a draft interlocal agreement. In fact, this week I'm waiting on comments back from just one city attorney, so we should be able to finalize that. So Roland Park's revenues, which I think are about $33,000 a year, were added into this recommended budget. So that those figures were adjusted slightly from a previous version that you had seen. We did talk just briefly about the shift of the null UBAS treatment in the CIP. I didn't re-include the CIP program. When you get the recommended budget that comes forward in August, you will see that we have shifted that project. It did not fall out of the plan, but it moves from 2021 to 2023. A couple of other things that we haven't talked about that were included in the memo, highlighting some of the other funds that we're required to budget for. So in the Special Alcohol Fund, which receives a third of the alcohol tax revenues that come in annually, about $75,000 a year. Historically, we've taken the majority of those funds and contributed them to the Drug and Alcoholism Council that's supported by UCS of Johnson County, and they offer a grant program because those funds have to be spent specifically on services that provide alcohol and drug abuse prevention and treatment programs. So rather than trying to find those programs and manage those programs ourselves, we've used that. So in 2019, we're recommending $40,000 of that go to the Drug and Alcoholism Council. Would hold on to about $15,000 and allocate that to offset expenses that we have in providing the DARE program in our local schools. And then an additional $15,000 to support the mental health co-responder program. In the Solid Waste Utility Fund, that's the fund in which we account for all of the fees that are collected from our residents for the annual trash, recycling, and yard waste contract that is currently with Waste Management. We did receive notice earlier this year that there would be about a 3.68% increase in the 2019 contract. That's within the limit allowed by our contractual language. And we have recommended or built the budget around a current cost sharing, keeping the same current cost sharing percentage in place. So 86% paid by the resident, 14% paid by the city. And so you can see that total annual fees per a single family household in 2019 would go, they're currently at about $169 a year to $175 a year. So minimal increase. That contract is up and expires at the end of 2019, so we will be going through a process in 2019 to look at how we want to deliver those services going forward. It does take, for the city's portion, we do have an $85,000 subsidy or transfer that comes from the general fund to support that contract. The Mission Convention and Visitors Bureau, or MCVB fund, is one that we established several years ago to account for revenues coming from the transient guest tax. And that's required to maintain those in a separate fund. The revenues coming off of that transient guest tax are currently used exclusively to support the production and distribution of the Mission magazine 5 times a year. And in fact, for the last about year and a half, it's not Value Place any longer, I can't remember the name of it, but that's who's generating transient guest tax, and it is actually covering all of the costs of the magazine. For the first several years, we were subsidizing from the general fund with funds previously used for the newsletter, but the transient guest tax will support that. Also through the MCBB fund, it really serves as a pass-through or conduit for our holiday adoption program, the monies that are taken in and then those expenses that come out, and then we also manage the funds for the Mission Business Partnership. They asked several years ago when they sort of were reformatting if the city would take on that responsibility. So they bring us their deposits, and then they bring us requests for expenditures. We manage that through that fund. Then the Mission Crossing, TIF, and CID funds, really those are simply pass-through funds. We get those distributions from the county, and those are paid out to the various developers per the terms of the existing development agreements. So our plan at this point is next week at the city council meeting, we would present kind of I'm anticipating a PowerPoint presentation, community dialogue on the budget. So certainly encourage folks to come and take a look at our budget then. That will give us an opportunity, if there's anything we need to react or respond to do so prior to our legally required public hearing on the budget, which is scheduled for our August 1st Finance and Administration Committee meeting. And then we would have the budget prepared for council consideration and adoption at your August 15th city council meeting. So I'm happy to answer any questions we have on the budget overall, any of the funds.
Laura, I have one question about the property tax lid. I don't know, this might be better for Brian, but for one of you, how close are we to the lid with our current mill rate? Like how close to hitting the lid? Did you look at that?
Well, how to describe this best? So as the property tax assessment goes up, in essence, the way the lid works is your mill rate goes down. Now, there's an exception that's allowed for that. That's public safety. So that public safety exception, we were able to bring our mill rate back up to the rate that it's at currently.
So that's what kept us under the lid, was our particular public safety expenditures.
Yes,
so
we're paying for a radio system next year, and then we've got some additional personnel costs, primarily health insurance. We were able to capture that for public safety.
So I think
if we didn't have that, we've dropped it by 1 mil.
Yes,
if we hadn't had that, okay.
Yes.
Good job, you guys.
Yeah, I just wanted to say the comment, you've done yeoman's work on the budget. Being the first time I've gone through this, I'm very respectful of much work you did. Thank you. Very grateful.
Great.
I have a comment outside the budget.
I think we should.
Well, it's just a
Well,
discussion.
it's a discussion, so we'll have the community dialogue, and then it will be an action item on your August agenda.
Did we at one point have the community dialogue on the 23rd? So we don't have a meeting on Wednesday the 23rd?
You do not have a meeting on Wednesday the 23rd. We had some, yes,
We have in the past.
we had some confusion. It was on the calendar, we did not imagine that.
It's been the fourth Thursday.
Go ahead and move on.
Yeah.
Debbie, you got something to add?
I know at some point we're probably going to want to sit down and go over an assessment of how the picnic went. Concerns about some fireworks going under new cars and things, but I want to bring something up, and it's not critical, but it's a concern to me, and it's our recycling process. It doesn't work. And I think we need to go beyond, it's not a lot of money, but we need to go beyond having a recycle bin here and a trash can 25 yards away. And it's not Kristi's responsibility, it's collectively ours, and to me it kind of goes back with sustainability. We need a branding process where Mission is known for having a certain color or a certain logo or something on these recycling bins, because I went through and cleared out as much of the plastic as I could have out of the trash and put them in the recycle and vice versa. And we shouldn't do that. Kids are the best educators for their parents about what needs to be recycled and how it can be done. But ours is not working. This goes on. I've been on this council almost 19 years now. A long time we didn't have any recycling. I think Parks and Rec is doing their darndest to make sure that they're in the community center. But we need an option that doesn't exist right now, to me, to make sure that the stuff goes in. It's great for trash, it's great for education, and this city has done amazing work on sustainable options and trying to get environmental concerns at the top of the list. But this one doesn't work. And this is, I don't know, Kristi, if you can attest to this, it doesn't work the way it is now, does it? People are throwing everything, and we almost, if we have to spend a little bit, I'll even throw some more personal money in. If we have a recycling bin next to a trash can so that it's, you know, every 30 feet or something when we have these events, we have an opportunity to collect them and kind of show in the community that we mean business, because right now it's not working.
I can talk about that. The special event recycling model that I think would work best is always to have someone staffing it. And the Bridging the Gap model is that you have someone who is helping a person approaching with items and helping them guide it. And that's really, especially at high volume events, the way that you make any kind of impact. Because even if you have equal bin options, that instruction and that sort of hand-holding, which they've always staffed through volunteers, and I think we could get our events registered through their site potentially so that the volunteers could come out to us, or it would just be another volunteer item. But I really think if you're serious about it, the clear recycling bins that you can see what's in them, and then having a friendly helper greet you at the trash can in all seriousness. And another just philosophy is that you don't have a trash can that isn't accompanied by equal recycling bin right next to it. So,
well, I guess I'd offer first that we go to Sustainability Commission and find out, because maybe I'm just, I started with this, and I don't expect them to come say, well, what do you want? I expect them to tell me what we need, and then we'll find either the time, the commitment, or the money for it.
No, I agree. I think it would be the statement that we really are serious about it and we want to do it at all of the bigger events, and then they could meet you right where you are on that. So.
And with that, I don't know, Laura, if you have any other department updates for us?
I do, just a couple of things. So we talked a little bit about the temporary fencing that went up around the EPC Mission Trails project with Crossland. We've been working with them this week. We posted that west side of Beverly is no parking. One of the things as we went over to look is not only is that fence there, which we want the sidewalk closed because that is the construction entrance for the project, and you don't want to be directing your pedestrians and encouraging your pedestrians to walk in front of your truck entrance. So I understand that concern, but then as we looked at it, the cars that were then parking on the street made it difficult to see, so you were edging further out in the street to go around those. Crossland has, so we posted those temporary no parking. Crossland has rolled back the screen on the southern portion of the site. They need to go back and do it on the north, because you now can only see into the construction drive-through area. So they just need to roll back that similar portion, which gives you better visibility up that street. So John's been working with kind of their project manager to address those, and we'll just continue to watch what's happening along there. I think the feel, I drove it a couple of times today, and not having those cars parked there had a tremendous impact on feeling like you could get out and turn onto that street and travel safely. So. Just a reminder, if you don't need to come to City Hall next week during the swim team championships, we would encourage you to avoid it because parking is going to be at an absolute premium. And those are on Tuesday and Thursday. And
it's competing with the market on Thursday night, isn't it?
Or supplementing the market. And get them down that trail.
That's right.
They'll get hungry at some point.
And I think, and photos, and then that's all I have really.
So, right, of course, it never fails. As soon as I sent you all the email about the photos for the August meeting, Rob Mitchell wrote, and the reason that we didn't target July was because he had a trip. He's canceled that trip and had something come up in August. So if you all are available, we would do it before the council meeting next week. Which is a quick turn. I don't know what you all plan on wearing, but we
have a week to think about it.
Yeah. So if you're free and can come a bit early next week, Rob would love to just take care of it so he's not, changing schedules again in the future if you can. Rob Mitchell of Yellow Lab is going to do it. Yeah. So that works. It looked like everyone was going to be there, and so may as well, no time like the present.
Solids, right? They're solids.
Yeah, right. Solids are good.
Solids are good.
I hope my face looks sealed better.
So I will resend out just a confirmation of that.
anybody have anything else? If not, I think we'll anxiously await getting some certified letter by next Tuesday or so probably, and we will have a great weekend. We'll go ahead and call our committee meeting adjourned. Thank you.